It's DSP's worst gaming trends of 2012. Number 3, Attack of the Game Bugs. You know, I've been doing this for so long, I kind of see myself as a YouTube gaming veteran. I've been putting out videos since 2008, and for the years of 2009 and 2010, before I even did this full time, I still made an attempt to play every major retail release. Now, undoubtedly in 2011 and 2012, when I partnered with Machinima, I've been playing more and more major games, and to the point where I'm actually trying to play every single game that comes out, and it can be a little bit of overload. But what I can tell you is this: undoubtedly, 2012 was a year where I've played more games with major game-breaking bugs and glitches than ever before. And it could be as simple as just items floating in midair and kind of ruining an otherwise dramatic part of the game, or it could be something that really is game-breaking, like a mission that you just can't complete because a waypoint somehow went underground, or something just isn't completing during the course of it. And I just don't understand what is the source of this increase in game bugs this year. Now, it's funny how game bugs can come in different varieties. Sometimes you can have really silly ones, like, take for example Max Payne 3, where you had a really interesting scene where Max is taking a time out from slaughtering this group of bad guys to play the piano. What happens during my playthrough? His arms freaking unhinge and contort into a mess. I mean, it's hilarious to watch, but if you were actually playing the game, this is supposed to be like a heartfelt moment where Max is kind of reflecting a little bit on his past and his life and the things that he's done, and to see the arms just completely pop out of their sockets and get worked around his body, it's hilarious, but it's also disconcerting. Like, how could this happen? How could a very simple cutscene turn into something so silly? Now compare this to later on in the game when you're in a very difficult firefight against dozens of enemies on a boat, and they're shooting at you and you really don't have a good amount of cover or anywhere to hide. And as I'm trying to do this, I'm failing repeatedly. It's taking me almost 20 minutes to beat this sequence, and then during the gameplay I somehow sink through the floor of the boat, go completely underwater, and running in circles. And here's the thing: I had already met several checkpoints during the sequence, and the game doesn't allow you to reload from a checkpoint. It makes you completely reload from the beginning of the level, which is a huge flawed gameplay mechanic. So this game bug could have potentially screwed me out of even more time because I got sucked under the boat. Now, what I ended up doing was actually running around in the water underneath the boat until the enemies finally got a bead on me and shot me and killed me so that it would restart me from the checkpoint. But, I mean, in a game like Max Payne 3, where it's supposed to be, wow, this polished game from Rockstar, and they treat it in high reverence, like this was the Rockstar release for the year, to have these kind of game bugs in them, and by the way, these aren't the only ones, these are just the two startling ones that come to mind, this is completely unacceptable. Now you might be saying to yourself, well Phil, you know, you're the only one who experienced those game bugs, so, you know, it's not a big deal. Well, what about some of the game bugs that everyone experienced? How about in Assassin's Creed 3, where most people were seeing things like floating objects, heads rotating during cutscenes, all kinds of crazy stuff, bugged missions. That game this year was probably a major consensus that upon release, Assassin's Creed 3 was absolutely chock full of game bugs. And for a major retail release, this being supposedly the number 3 entry in the series, and they had supposedly been working on this for 2 to 3 years, and it should have had more polish. What about a game like Street Fighter Cross Tekken, which after getting its first gameplay patch that was actually supposed to improve gameplay, actually had a game bug with Rolento, where if he threw his projectile knife, which is actually a common move used in the game, and someone actually hit the knife, that the whole game would crash. I mean, that is a monstrous game-breaking bug. And then there are games where it wasn't necessarily the actual game itself that had problems, but it was the matchmaking and the network infrastructure on launch. What about a game like Twisted Metal, where the actual developer and head of the project tweeted during launch week that he was publicly apologizing for the fact that Sony servers were so weak that people couldn't make parties, they couldn't matchmake with parties, and so you were pretty much forced to play with random people, and even then, for the first week or two, people were constantly dropping and crashing out of matches. What about a game like PlayStation All-Stars, where even though they had an open beta for people who were PS Plus users, they still had game bugs such as picking a character at the select screen, going online, and then seeing somehow you're playing as a different character. I mean, this is like elementary stuff, and it just wasn't addressed. Again, 2012, we're talking games are major money, bigger than movies, bigger than a lot of entertainment, yet we still have these games that seem to be released, and it's almost like they're in a beta phase when you buy them. Now, outside of all of that, for me, my personal silliest game bug of 2012 was with way back when I played Silent Hill Downpour. Now, if you remember, when I had played Silent Hill Downpour, I pre-ordered it at GameStop, and I got a pre-order bonus DLC code to get a nail gun. And so I got it, and during the course of the game, I used it a couple times, but it never really was anything major that added to my gameplay. But what I found was that there was a crippling game bug that didn't allow you to ever drop the nail gun, and this completely hindered my playthrough because in that game you can only hold 2 items at once. So I always had to hold the nail gun, and then I kind of had to choose between holding another gun or a melee weapon, and there were certain parts of the game where you would get like a really powerful weapon. I actually had gotten like the rarest weapon in the game, a golden gun or whatever, and I actually had to drop it because I needed to use a melee weapon to open a door, and then when I went back realized the door or the room where I dropped the golden gun in had sealed itself off and I was unable to get it. So in this case, I was actually punished for pre-ordering a game and putting in a code that was supposed to be some kind of a pre-order incentive. I mean, did no one test this content? Apparently not. So as we move on, games are undoubtedly going to become bigger, better, larger scope, more open world, and when you see bigger games you understand, okay, maybe there's going to be some bugs in this and I have to give some leeway. But I just don't understand how this year there were so many retail games that were supposedly supposed to be polished and ready for play. So hopefully in the future, these game companies, as they make better games, will take the time to test them further and find some of these things out, because I'll be honest with you, a lot of the times when I'm popping in a new game into my console or booting it up for the first time on my PC, I kind of feel like I'm a beta tester, and that's not a good feeling to have. Coming up next, we're going to get a little bit personal. We're going to wind it down a touch, and I'm going to speak from the heart about something that's really personally affected both myself and other true gamers this year on YouTube. Stay tuned.